She didn't even flinch when I walked in. That was the first red flag. The second? Her hand was still on his chest when our eyes met. It was loud in that fake luxury event hall. Bass-heavy music, plastic champagne flutes, people wearing rented confidence and pretending their office friendships were real. No one noticed me slip in. No one cared that the man kissing my wife had both hands on her hips like he owned the lease. I don't remember breathing. I don't remember walking past the catering table or stepping over someone's purse to get closer. I just remember her lipstick, smeared at the corners, glowing under the purple lights, and the way she tilted her head when he whispered something in her ear. Like it was normal. Like it was allowed. She laughed. I stood 5 feet away. Still, she didn't look at me. So I took out my phone. One photo. I didn't post it. I didn't send it to anyone. I just stared at it. Proof. Digital oxygen for the part of me that wanted to scream. I don't know how long I stood there before she finally turned. Her expression dropped like she'd stepped into a freezer. She blinked once, then slowly moved her hand away from his shirt. He turned too, confused, smug, clueless, until he followed her gaze and saw me. No one said anything. 3 seconds. Then I turned and walked out. I could hear her voice behind me. Wait. Elle, no, please, don't. But I didn't stop. She never chased me. Back home, I placed her key on the hallway table and locked the deadbolt from the inside. I turned off the lights, took off my shoes, and lay on the floor with my eyes wide open. I wasn't crying. Not yet. Just listening to the sound of my pulse in my ears. At 1:52 a.m., my phone vibrated. I messed up. I need to talk to you. Please don't shut me out. I didn't answer. By 2:10, the messages turned desperate. By 3:40, the knocking started. Soft at first, then harder, then fists, then sobs. Please, open the door. Please. I was stupid. It meant nothing. I didn't know you'd come. I didn't think you'd see. I sat in the dark, phone in my hand, the photo still open. Her mouth was open in the kiss. Confetti stars glinted in her lip gloss. At 6:07 p.m., the night before the party, while she was in the shower humming along to a song she once said she hated, I slipped it into the velvet pouch of her designer tote bag, the one she only takes to high-level work events. I placed it under her business cards and breath mints, exactly where I knew she wouldn't look. The device itself? A voice recorder. Thin, matte black, disguised as a portable charger. One button. One purpose. I had ordered it 2 weeks ago after her patterns changed. She never liked long showers. Suddenly, they became 30-minute steam concerts. She never used perfume. Suddenly, she kept one bottle in her glove box and one in her drawer at work. She hated parties. But this one she was so excited for. She curled her hair twice and redid her makeup 3 times. I didn't trust my instincts. I trusted data. So I placed the recorder in her bag and said nothing. When she kissed my cheek on her way out, I didn't flinch. I wished her a good night. She smiled too brightly, like someone performing affection instead of feeling it. And then she was gone. The next morning, after she finished sobbing at the door and finally gave up, I waited 2 hours before going outside. I knew she'd be parked nearby, watching, waiting to ambush me. But eventually she drove off, probably assuming I wasn't home. That's when I retrieved the recorder. There were 7 hours of audio. It took me 4 hours to listen. I paused often, not because of noise or bad quality. The device worked better than I expected, but because of what I was hearing. At exactly 8:21 p.m., she told someone named Travis that I wasn't coming because he wouldn't survive 1 hour with grown-ups. At 8:58, he asked her if she liked her drink. She said, "Not as much as I used to like my husband." At 9:17, laughter, then muffled voices, then something wet, rhythmic, breathy, kissing. And at 9:43, a phrase that made my stomach cave in. "Let's go somewhere quieter." She didn't sound drunk. She didn't sound ashamed. She sounded eager. My throat tightened. My jaw locked. And still, I kept listening. I made myself. At 10:11, I heard them in the restroom. Not the stall, the private restroom her company reserves for executives during events. Her voice echoed. Her laughter was soft, breathless, flirtatious. I won't describe what I heard next. Not because I can't, but because it would make you hate her too soon. At 11:03, someone knocked on the restroom door. Marla hissed, "Just a second," in a tone I'd never heard before. It wasn't embarrassed. It was annoyed. As if the interruption was rude. As if the people outside were the ones crossing a line. The last words on the recording before the background static took over? From Travis. So, same time next week? She didn't say no. She just giggled. By 4 p.m. that day, she had sent 17 texts and left 9 voicemails. The last one was just her crying and whispering my name over and over. But I wasn't ready to talk, because I had a plan now. And it started with forwarding the audio file to someone in her life she never expected to hear it. I didn't want revenge. Not the kind with screaming or plates flying or angry Facebook statuses. That wasn't me. I'm not loud. I'm not clever in the moment. I'm the guy who thinks of what I should have said hours later, while brushing my teeth and staring at my own tired eyes in the mirror. But I do remember everything. Word for word. Tone for tone. Timestamp by timestamp. So when I finished listening to the audio file, I sat there for a long time. Phone screen dimmed, the silence of the house pressing into my ears. Then I opened my contacts and scrolled to one name I thought I'd never use in this context. Eloise. Her mother. We weren't close, but she always said the same thing to me, even back when Marla and I were just dating, and she was still testing my patience with her hot and cold moods. If she breaks your heart, Eloise told me one Christmas, you better not spare me the truth. I raised her, but I didn't raise her to be cruel. I remember thinking that was dramatic at the time. Turns out, it wasn't. So I recorded a voice message. Not a text. Not a call. A calm, clear, almost too controlled message. I didn't rant. I didn't yell. I didn't even cry. I just told her, Hi, Eloise. I know this might be the last time we speak, but I thought you should hear something. Marla was at a work party last night. She told me I wasn't invited, that it was employees only. I went anyway. I saw her kiss someone. I also had reason to place a recorder in her bag, and I think, as her mother, you deserve to know who your daughter really is when she thinks no one's watching. I paused, then added, If you still want to hear from me after you listen, I'll answer. If not, I'll understand. And I sent the audio. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. No response. I started doubting myself. Had I gone too far? Was I just dragging someone else into something personal? But then, at exactly 5:16 p.m, Eloise called. She didn't say hello. She just said, Tell me everything. I sat on the edge of the couch, heart pounding like I was on trial. I told her about the office party, the kiss, the recorder, what I'd heard. I didn't exaggerate. I didn't speculate. I just gave her the truth. And she didn't cry. She didn't make excuses for her daughter. She got quiet, cold. And then she said, She told me this morning that you'd locked her out because you were having an emotional episode. That you were being dramatic again. That she accidentally hugged a coworker too long, and you spiraled. I blinked. She said that. I asked, my throat suddenly dry. She said it like it was routine, Eloise said. Like she's done it before. There was a long pause. Then she said something I didn't expect. I want you to come over for dinner tomorrow. Just you. I have some things to tell you. And I think you deserve to hear them from me, before Marla finds out that I know. That night, Marla came back again. I didn't open the door. This time, she left a note. It was folded, taped to the window like some middle school drama. In her handwriting, she'd written, I made a mistake. I need you. Please, just talk to me before you do something we both regret. She had no idea. I'd already started doing it. Eloise lived in a small blue house at the edge of town, the kind with wind chimes, wicker chairs, and a front porch that looked like it had never been used in real life. I pulled up to her driveway right at 6 p.m. Sharp, stomach turning like I was going to a job interview I hadn't prepared for. My palms were sweating. My thoughts were tangled. There was a part of me that still thought, maybe this is too far. Maybe I should just walk away. But I didn't walk away. She opened the door before I could knock. She looked tired, the kind of tired that settles behind the eyes and stays for decades. Still, she offered a soft smile, like she didn't know whether to comfort me or apologize on behalf of the woman she'd raised. Come in, she said quietly. No hugs, no small talk, just silence and tension. I stepped inside. There were candles burning in the kitchen, a casserole in the oven, untouched, 2 plates on the table, set with silverware and cloth napkins, but we never sat down to eat. She gestured to the armchair near the window and said, I want to show you something before we talk. Then she disappeared down the hallway. When she returned, she was holding a red accordion folder, faded, stuffed, worn at the corners. She placed it on the coffee table like it was evidence in a trial. She didn't open it. Not right away. She just stared at it, tapping the corner with one finger, and then finally looked at me. I hoped I'd never need to open this again, she said. But you deserve to see who she really is, because I didn't want to believe it either. I didn't speak. I couldn't. I just leaned forward as she peeled it open and pulled out a stack of documents, photos, printouts, and handwritten notes. She placed the top photo in front of me. It was Marla, but not the Marla I knew. Her hair was darker, shorter. Her expression was hard, cold. She was standing next to a man I'd never seen, mid-30s, heavy-set, wearing a department store dress shirt and the kind of grin you only see on someone who thinks he's untouchable. That's Adam, Eloise said. Her ex from Oregon. She never told you about him, did she? I shook my head. She dropped out of college for him. Told me she was starting a real life. They moved in together. 6 months later, I get a call from her landlord. She'd disappeared. Left without notice. No forwarding address. I didn't hear from her for 8 weeks. When she finally called me, she said, I needed to get out before it got worse. What got worse? I asked slowly. Eloise picked up a folded document and handed it to me. It was a copy of a handwritten police statement, dated 2014. Signed, Marla Evans. The words that stood out immediately. I lied to my fiancé. I was seeing someone else. He found out. I looked up. She filed this. She never turned it in, Eloise replied. I found it in her nightstand after she moved back in with me. I didn't say anything then. I thought she was young, scared, maybe trying to protect herself. But she left out the most important part. Adam wasn't her fiancé. He was married. My mouth went dry. She was the other woman? I asked, barely able to say the words. She was the affair, Eloise said. And when his wife found out, everything blew up. Marla vanished. No apology. No closure. Just left town and rebranded her life. I felt the walls closing in. My wife, the woman who scolded me for not being open enough emotionally, had a secret life I'd never even glimpsed. A past built on lies, betrayal, and reinvention. I kept this file in case I ever needed to remind her who she used to be, Eloise said, her voice shaking slightly. But now, I think you need it more. She pushed the folder toward me. I didn't want it. I took it anyway. Later that night, back at my apartment, because yes, I had moved out without telling Marla, I opened the folder again. Inside, tucked in the back, was a sealed envelope with my name on it. I recognized Marla's handwriting instantly. I stared at it for a long time. I hadn't opened it yet, because I already knew whatever was inside would change everything again. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the envelope for so long, I forgot to breathe properly. It wasn't just the sight of my name written on the front. It was the way she'd written it. Sharp, careful, like she knew someday I'd be opening it in silence, with shaking hands and a racing heart. I peeled it open. No letter. No apology. No long, spiraling attempt at an explanation. Just 2 sheets of paper, printed, stapled together, folded with precision. The top line stopped me cold. Prenuptial agreement. Addendum C. Conditional clauses. My eyes scanned the page so fast, I had to go back and read it slowly just to make sense of what I was seeing. It was legal, formal, stamped with a lawyer's office I didn't recognize. It was dated 6 days before our wedding. I never saw this document before in my life. Not once. My head spun. It detailed financial clauses, but not the usual kind. Nothing about assets, alimony, or infidelity penalties. No, this was something else entirely. Clause 7C. Should the union dissolve due to loss of emotional intimacy or dissatisfaction with emotional availability, neither party shall pursue spousal support or demand further disclosure of past personal relationships. Clause 9A. In the event of dissolution, any secondary party or informal legal witness familiar with the emotional decline of the relationship, e.g., therapist, counselor, friend, shall not be compelled to testify or be subpoenaed. Clause 10. Both parties acknowledge awareness of each other's emotional limitations and choose to proceed regardless, waiving the right to claim future betrayal based on past withheld truths, including but not limited to premarital affairs or undisclosed emotional connections. And at the bottom, 2 signatures. Hers, and another, but not mine. I blinked, trying to steady my breathing. It was signed Ellery M. Chase. But the signature wasn't mine. It was forged, not even close, and it had been notarized. I checked the notary name. She'd used someone from her own company's legal department. A woman named F. Ramos. I froze. I remembered that name. She was the woman who had toasted us at our wedding dinner, sitting right next to Marla and laughing about the ridiculously easy wedding planning process. Now it made sense. They'd forged a legal document and tucked it away, hidden from me, as insurance. A safety net. A rope ladder for Marla to climb back out of the marriage with clean hands if it all went south. I was the backup plan. No, I was the emotional placeholder. This whole time, I thought I was the safe choice. The dependable one. The man who finally offered her the kind of love she'd never gotten from her reckless past. But she never picked me for who I was. She picked me for what I wasn't. I wasn't explosive. I wasn't suspicious. I wasn't going to dig. Until now. I felt like throwing up. I paced the room with the contract in my hand, phone vibrating on the counter, her name lighting up the screen over and over again. I didn't answer, not even when she texted. I know you're angry, but please, I can explain everything. Just 1 hour. One conversation. I stared at the text, then back at the contract, then down at the old voice recorder on the table. I didn't need 1 hour. I needed one final move. And Eloise had given me exactly the opening I needed. I don't think I slept more than 40 minutes that night. Not because of anger, not even pain. It was something worse, a sharp, silent clarity that kept slicing through every thought like a razor. For the first time since I saw her kiss that man, I wasn't heartbroken. I was focused. The fake prenup wasn't just betrayal. It was strategy. That meant I had to make my own move, and it had to be precise. The next morning, I dressed like I used to when I worked corporate before switching to teaching. Pressed shirt, clean shave. The tie she used to say made me look competent but harmless. I booked an appointment under a pseudonym with her company's legal arm, which she bragged about constantly during her marketing events. Apparently, they offered legal consultations to small business clients, branding, contracts, content protection. I walked in like I was a potential client. The receptionist smiled, offered coffee, and handed me a clipboard. I signed in as Leon B. Fisher, owner of a fictional media podcast company in Boston. Within 15 minutes, I was escorted into a glass-walled conference room by a young, polished attorney named Miranda Crane, tall, professional, way too cheerful for someone about to get blindsided. She greeted me, handed me a business card, and asked what my business needed. So I played the part. I said I was starting a media podcast and wanted to learn about securing my assets, particularly protecting against ex-partners leaking sensitive content or fabricating claims after a split. She started into her pitch like it was routine, flipping through a brochure, showing me basic clauses. And then I said, let's say, hypothetically, I discovered someone forged my name on a document, a premarital agreement. But this document was notarized by someone from your legal team, without my actual consent. What would the consequence of that be? She froze. The air in the room changed like someone had just slammed shut a vault. She lowered the brochure slowly and looked me in the eye for the first time with suspicion. That would be a very serious accusation, she said carefully. But this is all hypothetical, I replied, smiling flatly. Of course. She didn't smile back. She shifted her tone, now clinical, her words suddenly deliberate. In that case, the notary could face disciplinary action, potentially lose their commission, and depending on the intent, there could be criminal implications. Even if the signer didn't know it was forged. I asked. She paused. If it can be proven they were complicit, yes. Especially if it was designed to mislead or defraud someone else. She didn't know who I was yet. Not for certain. But she knew I wasn't there for a podcast contract. I pulled out my phone, opened the scanned copy of the contract, and slid it across the table. I'd like to understand the legality of this signature, Miranda. I believe it was notarized by a Felicia Ramos, who, unless I'm mistaken, works 2 floors above us. Her face went pale. She didn't touch the phone. She just stared at it, then at me. Then she stood up. I need to speak with someone, she said. I'll wait, I said. She walked out fast, heels clicking down the hall like a metronome counting down to something inevitable. 15 minutes later, the office manager returned. A man I'd never seen. Suit too expensive. Smile too tight. He asked if I'd be willing to resolve this matter amicably. That's when I knew they'd confirmed everything. I stood, put the phone back in my pocket, and replied, I'm not interested in a resolution. I'm interested in watching what happens when everything you covered up starts to unravel. Then I left. That night, Marla didn't just knock on my door. She pounded, screamed, demanded. I didn't open. She texted a single sentence. What did you do? I didn't reply. But the next morning, someone else did. I thought I'd uncovered everything. The forged prenup, the affair at the office party, the secret file her mother gave me, filled with past betrayals like a trail of expired lies. I thought the worst had already happened. But then came the email. It arrived just before noon the next day, hidden between newsletters and junk mail, with the subject line, Request for informal statement. HR conflict resolution intake, confidential. At first I thought it was spam. But the sender was legitimate. Her compliance at Nelscott Consulting. Marla's company. The message was polite, professional, and shockingly neutral in tone. It didn't mention the forgery. It didn't reference any of my previous visits. It simply asked if I would be willing to provide an informal statement regarding a sensitive internal complaint in which your name and personal relationship with a current employee may offer relevant context. I read it 3 times. Then I called the number listed at the bottom. The woman who answered identified herself as Kara, head of internal compliance. Her voice was clipped, efficient, not unkind. I told her I had recently visited the office to inquire about a legal matter. She said, "Yes, I'm aware. That's not what this is about." She then told me, very carefully, that another man had come forward. A new hire. Someone from the software side of the firm, who had recently ended a personal relationship with Marla. And when he learned she was married, to me, he filed a formal complaint. That's when I felt the floor start to tilt. "You're saying this happened after the office party?" I asked. "No," she replied. "It began before. Weeks before. Months, maybe." She couldn't give me all the details, confidentiality policy. But the man had already provided screenshots, messages, calendar invites, receipts for off-site meetings that weren't company-sanctioned. Apparently, they had been seeing each other discreetly. She told him she was divorced, that I was her ex who still lived nearby but refused to move out. The complaint? Emotional manipulation, creating a hostile environment after he tried to end things. She allegedly told him, "Don't embarrass me. I've buried worse." I nearly dropped the phone. Buried worse? She wasn't just reckless. She was practiced. I asked Kara if my name was mentioned in the report. "Yes," she said. "And you're not the first." "What do you mean?" I asked, throat dry. "Mr. Chase," she said gently, "this is the 3rd time we've had to address inappropriate boundaries involving Ms. Evans and her coworkers. The difference now is, this time, the other party is pressing it further. And the evidence trail points back months. We're conducting an internal review, and your context could be helpful. That's all we're asking." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to hang up and vanish from the whole thing. But the other part, the one that had spent too long being quiet, too long second-guessing myself, told me this wasn't just about my marriage anymore. This was about stopping her pattern. So I said yes. And I told them everything. From the voice recorder, to the fake prenup, to the file her mother gave me. I didn't embellish. I didn't need to. The truth was enough. And when I finished, Kara simply said, "We'll be in touch. And thank you." That night, Marla didn't come to the door. She didn't text. Didn't call. The silence was louder than all her apologies. But just before midnight, a knock came anyway. Not on my door. On my window. I pulled the curtain aside, and standing there in the shadows was the other man. He looked younger than I expected. Maybe late 20s. Dressed like someone who hadn't been home in a day. His face pale. Eyes tired. I stepped outside. He said one thing. "I think we need to compare stories." We sat on the steps of my porch for nearly 2 hours. Me and the man she'd lied to, seduced, and tossed aside like he was an accessory to her storyline. His name was Nolan. Fresh hire in the product development division. Smart. Sincere. Still reeling. He told me he met Marla in an elevator. Literally. First week of his job. He said she complimented his shoes, laughed too easily, acted like he was the most interesting man in the room. He never had a chance. "She made me feel like I mattered," he said, rubbing his palms nervously, like the memory still burned. "Then she told me you were her controlling ex, said you used to show up at her office, that you recorded things, that you were dangerous." That's when I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so precisely reversed. The manipulation. The rewritten narrative. It was surgical, Marla didn't react. She preempted. She framed me as the problem before I ever had the chance to tell the truth. But the truth had a way of collecting weight. Nolan handed me a USB stick. These are our messages. From day one. I thought, if you ever needed proof. I did. The next morning, I sent everything. My voice recordings, the forged prenup, the USB from Nolan, even the envelope with my fake signature, to Kara at HR. No drama. No revenge manifesto. Just data. Dates. Facts. Quiet clarity. By the following Thursday, I got the call. Marla had been placed on administrative leave, pending formal review. Legal was reviewing internal notary protocol breaches, and her personal conduct was under inquiry for breach of ethical standards. That same night, Marla came to the apartment. But she didn't knock. She stood across the street, crying. I saw her from the window, arms folded across her chest like she could hold herself together just a little longer. But I didn't go out. I didn't wave. I didn't even move. Somewhere deep inside, something had settled. Not anger. Not pity. Just peace. She eventually got into her car and drove away. And for the first time in what felt like years, I didn't wonder where she was going. I didn't care. A month later, I met Nolan again, not to talk about her, but to thank him. Strange how pain brings people together. We still talk sometimes. Not about her. About life. Music. Work. Forgiveness. Growth. Eloise, Marla's mother, sent me a letter. Handwritten. She wrote, "You were the only honest part of her life. I'm sorry it had to cost you everything to prove it." I wrote back. I said, "It didn't cost me everything. I got myself back." Today, I live in a different part of the city. A smaller place. A little quieter. My students still drive me crazy, but I laugh more now. I cook. I sleep without checking the lock twice. I go for walks. And last week, I met someone at a used bookstore. She was looking for a rare photography book I happened to own. We had tea. Talked about nothing. It felt easy. I don't know what happens next. But I know I'll face it as myself. Whole, honest, and free of the woman who built her world on secrets.